Chief Justice David Maraga, like I said, has opposed what they called a planned transfer of some functions of the judiciary to the executive, where he says an executive order that was issued by President Uhuru Kenyatta on Wednesday placing the Judicial Service Commission and the State Department was not only unconstitutional but also went against the spirit of the separation of powers. And we have our reporter Silas Apollo now joining us live for more details. He is talking to constitutional lawyer Waiganjo Kamotho, who's going to shed more light on this development. Silas?
Yes, Zainab, rightly as you said, it's actually not Chief Justice David Maraga only who's had issues with the executive order. In the political circles also, it has created a lot of tension and debate, especially after our talks went around that, the office of the president and the deputy president was collapsed together. And so the deputy president now is in the office of the president. There are a lot of talks in terms of what it means to have the presidency and what it means to have the office of the president. So a lot of concerns have been raised in the political circles. Of course, Chief Justice David Maraga also spoke about it. He made a statement today. The issue that Maraga is basically against is what he says the movement of the Judicial Service Commission into a constitutional office. So I'm joined right now by Kamotho Waiganjo, who is a constitutional lawyer and also sat in the committee, of course, that helped spearhead the 2010 Constitution in terms of implementation. Just to tell us exactly what it takes of this executive order by the president and the interpretations. Are they correct, as they have been said by a number of people, or what exactly should we take from it? So Wakili, thank you so much for joining us on NTV. President Uhuru Kenyatta yesterday issued an executive order. What is your take exactly on the executive order in terms of the rearrangement of the structure of government? Is it a constitutional thing exactly, or what exactly should we take from it?
One, I think it's important to recognize that this is not the first time that an executive order has been issued by the president. And there is surprising overreaction. And I think the overreaction is partly informed by two aspects. One is that there are certain changes that have happened in terms of the substance of the order. But those are fairly nominal in the sense that one sees some changes, the inclusion of the NMS, the Nairobi Metropolitan Services, in the office of the president. And then, a couple of changes in certain ministries. I think what has surprised people is not so much the law of the executive order, but the politics of the executive order. Because while all the executive orders since 2013 have talked about the presidency, the executive order was said to be issued by the presidency. The office under which the president and the deputy president lies was always called the presidency. That has changed. The executive order is now issued by the president, and the office is now stated as the office of the executive office of the president. In legal terms, that makes no difference. The issue, the office of the so-called presidency, was always a legal myth. It was a political myth. Because the president is a constitutional office and it is not a shared office. But politically it was important to give the impression that it was a shared presidency. I think this executive order restates the constitutional position that the presidency is not a constitutional office. The reality is that in the last couple of weeks, we have seen that statement made very, very clearly as to whether we have a presidency, a shared executive, or we have the president with a deputy. And I think that the executive order, from a political perspective, changes that. But in terms of real time, in terms of constitutional terms, that is not a big deal.
And we've seen Chief Justice David Maraga coming out strongly, especially on the issue of the Judicial Service Commission, which he says should be left to the judiciary, that both arms of government should be independent as enshrined in the Constitution. What is your take on the matter, and especially President Uhuru Kenyatta placing the Judicial Service Commission under a state department?
One, the CJ makes a correct position in terms of the Constitution and the law, but I think it's an overreaction when he gives the impression that the president is reorganizing the judiciary, of giving it functions. Again, since 2013, all these constitutional commissions, the judiciary, parliament, have been in the executive order. They are always stated there. And the reason for that is twofold. One is that that is the perspective from which the president, as the head of state, sees the structure and organization of all the arms of government. And that is important, especially because that executive order does not add any functions or restate them other than what is in the constitution and the law. So that is number one. But number two is something that people forget. In cabinet, when issues are raised, even in respect of these constitutional organs, who articulates their concerns, who pursues the issues in cabinet? Because the Chief Justice does not sit in cabinet, the Speaker does not sit in cabinet. So if you do not allocate a political responsibility in each of these organs to a cabinet secretary, their issues will never be articulated effectively in cabinet. So I think sometimes we are too suspicious. Maybe it's a COVID suspicion season, but sometimes we are too suspicious of what government does. And because sometimes we don't look at history, we then tend to overreact and assume something big has happened. In this one, I don't think it takes away the independence of the judiciary at all. I don't think it changes their functions. If you read the functions, they are the ones in the constitution, including, in fact, even all other constitutional commissions are in that order. And they're very clearly stated as independent offices and constitutional commissions, but cabinet secretary is given the responsibility of ensuring that the issues are articulated in the cabinet sessions.
Okay, thank you so much, Okili. This is something, of course, we'd want to speak about on and on, but because of time, I'll hand over back to Zainab. Zainab, you heard him, he says there's nothing basically that changes in legal terms. Most of these things most of them are just legal jargons that have been used, here and there. But in terms of the constitutionality of these offices, the judiciary, the office of the deputy president, the relationship between the president and the deputy, most of these things don't change. So this is a conversation I will be having going forward, just to see what exactly happens. And of course, in our subsequent bulletins at 7 and 9 p.m. we'll be looking at this in more in-depth, just to interpret and state exactly what exactly is happening and what should we expect going forward. But for now, back to you, Zainab, in studio.